Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, I've never really been one to do these on a specific person. Like, I have talked about Mush and Jobs, a handful of other people, but generally speaking, I try to talk about an idea or a concept and not a person. But I don't know, well, actually, I do know how this happened. I follow EmRata's Instagram. So if you don't know her somehow, she's the one. I hate to define her this way, but you've probably seen her in the Blurred Lines video many years ago. And I followed her Instagram. I don't know why, but I do. I have for a long time. And she mentioned something about her podcast in there. And I don't remember even exactly what it was now because I've listened to a handful of them since this mention. And I finally just said, like, I'm going to check it out. I listened to it, and I have to tell you, I'm kind of shocked, honestly, in a very positive way, just by, like, sort of the ways that she's thinking, the things that she's thinking about. Obviously, very informed by her experience as a model and someone who was sort of treated as a sex object and all of this in the video and professionally as well. And, I think now, I don't know her age, I think she's in her 30s. She has a kid. I just listened to one of her episodes on her kid being 2 now, which is, it's an interesting thing. I've talked about Shakira before, but somehow, when you're younger, you get a snapshot of people, right? You see somebody and that's kind of the state that they're in. And as you get older, you get other views of them. So you get more of a progression. So when you're younger, you have this idea that somebody's like a monolith and a static, like that's just who that person is. And you get more of a sense of like the growth and development as a human being when you have the perspective of being a bit older. And I guess you could have that in principle when you're younger and just see, that was weird, just see people over time in the past, but it didn't really occur to me and somehow wasn't a thing that I did. If I saw an actor in an old movie, didn't notice that arc. And I think that, there are a lot of things, I guess it's a combination of things. When you get older, and I don't just mean that age is the thing here, but through experience and time, things come online. And I feel like, obviously there are certain things where they're probably biologically, like your brain is just not, when you're very young, your brain really is not yet set. And it's an interesting and kind of disturbing thing because you see people who are like 16 or 18, and from their perspective, many of them think of themselves as adults. And a lot of other people will talk about them as adults. This is not related to EmRata, but it's something that kind of occurs to me. And I've met more than a few people who were in high school and they were like 15 or 16 and dating some dude who was in his mid-20s, late 20s, maybe even older. The most extreme example I know is someone who was 18 and she was dating somebody who I think was in his mid-60s, and he had a daughter her age. And somehow, I don't know why this made it more weird and gross. He was a gynecologist. Somehow, like it shouldn't matter, I guess, but somehow it just like gave me a little bit of an extra ick and wince. But I think when people are young, they feel like, oh, I'm an adult, I can make these decisions, I'm fully formed and I have this rational framework for things. And I think as you get older, and again, I keep using the word older, I need a better word, as you get more seasoned or whatever. But older it's accurate, but it has the implication of like you have to be old to have that experience. And it definitely happens as you just gain time. You start having a different perspective on that. And you start seeing or I think you should start seeing the dude who, even somebody who's like 19 and in college, dating someone who's in high school, there's a very big not gulp, big gulf in terms of where they are mentally and in life. And the person in high school and their peers might not think of that as necessarily bad, but I can certainly say from my perspective, and I think from the perspective of many of the people that I know who were in the position of being the person in high school dating somebody older, they thought it was fine at the time. And then at a certain point, they look back and they're like, ugh, just, wow, that guy was kind of creepy and kind of taking advantage. I mean, there's an interesting thing when you engage with people who are, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but I've been, well, I haven't done it recently, but for many years, I was a volunteer on the NAACP Youth Council. And the kids that were there, and I don't know if kid is a disparaging word, but the people who were on the Youth Council, much more advanced than I was at their age. Just their ability to do public speaking, it kind of blows me away, because granted, I had social anxiety. I still have a bit, but social anxiety was standing in my way pretty badly. I was not comfortable. I was not confident, and getting up in front of a crowd was not a thing that I wanted to do. And it wasn't just that I didn't want to do it. I just could not put together more than a few sentences, probably. And it's not that I didn't think or wasn't able to have discussions with people. It was just that there was something that was not, I wasn't there yet, And I meet these people on the youth council, and especially the former president and some of the other higher ranking members. And they're so much, I can't even express how much more ahead they are from me at that age. They're at a level where I would say, certainly, I probably wasn't there as an undergrad. I was probably in grad school when I started doing presentations and teaching. I started to get to that level. And I'm not saying that now I'm not more advanced than that, but I've had a lot of time, so I should be. And in some ways, they're probably better at negotiating that kind of environment than I even am today. And all of that said, and I say that for a specific reason, when you really get to, you spend a little bit of time talking to people who are younger, they're not done yet. You really get the sense that they're, even when they're very advanced in certain ways, the cement is still wet. Things are not fully online. And part of it is also just their interests and their experiences and their thought process, all of this kind of stuff. It's just not, I don't mean to say at an adult level, but it's definitely at a lower level than someone who is a bit older. And I do think there's a certain point where, the difference between 17 and say 18 or 19 or low 20s, it's much bigger than the difference between say 22 and even 30, which is bigger than the difference between say 30 and 40, and probably, extrapolate that out. I suspect that the difference between somebody who's 40 or 50 and somebody who's 80, other than the regression from cognitive decline and this kind of stuff, I think the difference, the gulf shrinks, and the effective time reduces. Although you still do have the another big difference between people who are younger and people who are older is that when you're younger, you're just, by virtue of being younger and having experiences that came later, all of your references to popular culture and to media, movies, music, all of this kind of stuff, they're a different slice of history. Now there are certainly people who do reach back and kind of develop a catalog, and then there are older people who don't pay attention to anything and don't really have much of that. But I'm speaking of averages here, as always. And I mean, I guess anytime there's a generalization, you should just assume that's not like every single person, but on average. And in here, I would say most, probably. And so, I mean, getting back to what I was talking about, though, that level difference and that power imbalance, I think, is something that people don't appreciate, especially when they're younger. And I think similarly, and this is getting back to EmRata in a moment, but I think, you know, when you're younger and you're the hot chick in that blurred lines video, you feel really empowered. You feel like, oh, I'm taking advantage of, you know, people want me because of my body, and they're, you know, all of this. And her perspective was one thing at that time. And I would guess probably if you actually had a discussion with her at that time, you wouldn't find it very interesting. Maybe some people would, but I would suspect just not done cooking. You know, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean, if you had a discussion with me at that age, probably also, you know, not fully there. It's not to say that people don't have, you know, you can have a productive, interesting conversation with somebody who's younger, but it's going to kind of hit its conclusion pretty quickly. Whereas somebody who's more, I really am struggling at a better word than older, but somebody who's more experienced, has thought about things more, has spent more cycles kind of developing and reflecting and contemplating and learning and all of that kind of stuff, you really notice the difference. And it gives you a different sort of, I don't know, different experience subjectively with interacting with them. And the thing that is interesting to me, I mean, obviously she had, I don't know the details of her arc from then to the present. I know definitely bad things happened. She was taken advantage of. Is there sexual assault there? I don't know, but certainly seems possible. Who knows what else? You know, again, somebody else's life. I know just the most superficial bits about it, so I don't even want to speak about it. I don't want to pontificate on it, but I know some pretty significant things happened with her, and there are lots of different ways you could go from that. And the way that she seems to have gone, and this is just me reading in to what I've listened to and read so far, but she seems to have really done a good job of kind of, you know, stepping back and contextualizing herself and her experiences, understanding like, okay, we live in a capitalist society and you know, there are these market pressures to do these things and it's very patriarchal and, you know, I mean, you go down the list. And this is this gets to the reason that I'm even making this or speaking about her, is just that most people in general, and certainly most people probably of her ilk, you know, most people who are kind of models, and, you know, it's not that you don't think of models as like thinking deeply, but it's a stereotype that kind of exists for a reason. And it's very impressive to me how much she's, you know, not just thought about these things, but done research, learned about them, and talked about them and all of these kinds of things. So I guess what that's getting to, and the reason that I'm kind of making this to encourage you to listen to her stuff, is just that I think her perspective is actually, I mean, it helps that it's kind of in many ways similar to mine. I think I'm a little bit more anti-capitalist than she is, and I think she's a little bit more pragmatic than I am, but it's hard to say exactly. She definitely seems aware of the absurdity of the situation that we're in and the world we find ourselves in. Obviously, you know, she's got a podcast, she's got ads in it. I'm sure she gets, I don't know how much, but paid decently for it. And it's one of those things, because it's like, I always talk about it here, but I have no interest in monetizing this or commodifying it, or, you know, and obviously, you know, like if I was interested in that, I'd have to develop it in different ways and produce it in different ways. But the thing about that is we live in a world where those things matter. I mean, you do have to pay the bills at a certain point. Money, unfortunately, we're kind of subject to. And so it's a bit of a luxury that I can sit here and go, like, I mean, well, luxury coupled with a bit of delusion on my part or something, I guess, that I can, say, like, I don't really care if anyone listens to this or watches it, or, although I will say, not only, like, my mom listens to these and watches them, Gil listens to them, and I'm kind of okay with that. And then I just found out my mom was playing some of these for my sister's friend's kids, my sister's best friend, really, her kids. And it was one of those things where you're like, I probably have said some things in there that are not maybe age appropriate. Although I know certainly, like, when I was their age, when I was younger, I watched George Carlin, I watched, like, Vacation and a bunch of movies that probably were worse than anything that I said. And yeah, I think also, I'm just kind of reflecting here to think if there's anything that conceptually I think is inappropriate. I think it's more just some people might not be okay with maybe the language that I use. Certainly, I talk about ACAB a lot, and I've explained why I think that's true, and that's the system. And even though your best friend Bob is a really cool guy and seems like he's well-intentioned, and even though your stepdad or your husband or your father or your sister or your aunt or whatever, even though they're really cool, ACAB includes them too. And the reasoning behind that, I feel it necessary to say this because I'm not going to just trust you to go off and find it. But the reason behind that is not that those people are bad people inherently, per se. It's that they exist in a system which compels them to behave in certain ways. It compels them to be bastards. If you are a cop, you do have to be a special person to be the person putting your knee on somebody's neck. Special in a particularly horrible way. But almost anyone who is a cop will be that you might not be that person that's killing somebody. You're not the one necessarily murdering them. Although a lot of people, it's pretty easy, I think, especially with the training, where it's like, oh no, you're scared and you could easily get killed, which is a lie, incidentally, because I talk about this too, but it needs to be repeated. Being a police officer is safer than collecting garbage. It's safer than working on a farm. It's safer than being a delivery person. You could just go through a list of things that are more dangerous, and not like marginally more dangerous, significantly, like 2x or more dangerous than being a cop. Lots of things. But cops have conned people into thinking this. And cops themselves in their training are trained to think that everybody is a threat. Everybody could kill them. And I mean, if you or I, air quotes, not bastards, were given that training and we're in that situation, how hard, and you have the ability to end somebody's life just by pulling something out of your pocket and pointing it and clicking it. It's not that hard to get to that point. Even, I mean, you just think about it, because in a moment, something happens, it startles you, it scares you, especially if you're hyped up already and you've got that training. You could be a bastard. That's how easy it is. And again, even if you're not the person doing the killing, you're the person standing over to the side, watching that person do the killing. How many people, I know we all like to think that we'd be the hero and actually get up. How many people in that scenario, you have a, air quotes, superior officer, somebody who's at a higher rank than you, somebody who's been there for longer than you, killing somebody in front of you, and a lot of other cops are around you and they're just like going along with it. Are you going to be the one that stands up and does something about it? I would love to think that everybody would say yes. I would love to think that everybody in that scenario would, but history shows People don't. People get in that scenario, and whether it's like Nazi Germany or whether it's the present with cops or other things like this, people get in that scenario and they just watch it happen. And later on, people go through that and then don't say anything because they know, A, they feel some kind of culpability for it and some responsibility, which they should. They didn't do anything. And B, because they know they exist in a system where if they do say something, if they do try to see consequences actually precipitated, they're not going to be successful. Most likely, this kind of stuff happens, the cop is almost never, often they're not even, like put on paid administrative leave, read paid vacation. But when something does happen, they get paid vacation. They get a more bureaucratic sounding name for it, but it's paid vacation. And even when that happens, very, very rarely are charges brought, are they indicted. If they're indicted, they're very rarely actually convicted. And even when they're convicted, very rarely are consequences beyond that. And the thing is, like, even when they get fired, which is really hard and doesn't happen often because cops, I'm very pro-union. Pig unions, I mean, for actual pigs, they're fine. But for the police, their unions have made it almost impossible to fire a cop. And even when they do, there's no network, there's no system that says, don't hire this motherfucker because they just killed somebody. They had this pattern of doing this stuff. They had this pattern of planting evidence. They had this pattern of whatever. And that kind of stuff is why they're bastards. It really, I mean, you can go on and on and on about this. And I am, and I'm apologizing for that. It's one of these subjects that I think needs to be repeated often because I understand, like, people don't get it. And it's a problem. Like, when there's something that is so contrary to your understanding of how things work and your expectations of stuff, like the fact that cops basically do not do anything to protect public safety. Now, there is some evidence, not as much as you would think, but there's some evidence that having some cops beyond, versus having zero cops, having some kind of law enforcement visible and present actually does help prevent crimes and address crimes. That's like the tiny little film at the bottom. Yeah. And then beyond that, it's staggering. So, and I've said this many times, but like 5% of what police departments do has anything at all to do with violent crime. The 95% easily could be done by somebody who does not have body armor and a gun and a fucking tank and, paramilitary bullshit. So let's focus on that 5%. That 5%, you're like, okay, well, Scott, that 5% is worth it. So you could cut it down to 5%, reallocate the other stuff at other things that are better uses of those funds and resources. And the thing is, in that 5%, you start tearing that apart, and it's like, okay, well, in terms of crimes actually in progress being stopped by cops, tiny, tiny, tiny fraction. And for the most part, cops come after the fact. They don't actually do anything while things are happening, which means that those cops also probably don't need a gun, don't need body armor, don't need any of that shit. Take them out of the equation. And then what you get with the cops actually dealing with this stuff, you start teasing that apart. The statistics get a little fuzzy in this part because now we're in a place where they deliberately don't collect good data. They don't share it because it wouldn't reflect well on them. But, in that little tiny just film of things where you could almost argue maybe cops are helping, they generally aren't. They're not preventing crimes. They're not interrupting crimes. Often they're not catching people. And when they do catch people, they're often not getting prosecuted. People get raped all the time. And those rape kits just sit on the shelf. Even when they know who did it. It's fucking insane. Like, people can know this person did it. And they have the physical evidence for it. And even with all of that happening, even when charges are brought, I think it's something like a 50-50 shot that they actually get convicted. And if they don't get convicted, I mean, even if they do get convicted, obviously, you're still, it fucks up your life beyond just the actual event. But even if they do get convicted, even if they don't get convicted, let me reset that. If they don't get convicted, then now you've got this person that you just, tried to see face justice, so to speak, and they're out there in the world and they know people and they can harass you and there are consequences to that. And almost everybody, there's the whole idea that people who rape are like random people. And it's not to say that that never happens, but almost always, just like if kids are kidnapped, if somebody's raped, it's somebody that, 9 times out of 10, it's somebody that they knew. Often somebody that they trusted. And so it's somebody that is going to be in their life, or it's going to be very hard to extricate themselves from the situation where they're in contact with that person. And even if they cannot see that person, can avoid that person is integrated into their social network. And they're often, they're narcissistic, they're manipulative. They're people who will fuck you over just for trying to see them face consequences for some horrible thing that they did. So it's a bad situation. The thing that I always get when I tell people ACAB and I say defund the police and I say stuff like this, they're like, well, if somebody's attacking you or somebody's doing this, who are you going to call? And frankly, the cops probably are not going to help. Yeah, if my house get robbed, if my house gets robbed, cops are almost certainly not going to come during the event. So they come after. What the fuck are they going to do? They're going to laugh when you say oh, are you going to find my shit? No, they're not going to find your shit. They'll file a police report, which is about all they can do. It's certainly all they want to do. And that's it. They're not going to come and interrupt stuff. And then you get people who are like, well, this is why you need a gun. Your stupid gun isn't going to help either. The thing that helps is that we live in a civilization where that does not happen very often. It's not that it never happens, but it's a scenario that doesn't happen very often. And most of the time when that happens, it's somebody who's desperate. There are legitimately people who have something wrong with them. But you factor them out, and they are a small fraction. Get rid of those. Most of the time when somebody's, stealing something, when somebody's robbing something, it's because they're desperate. It's not because they're just a habitual, I've lost the word. I can't even think of the word. Kleptomaniac. They're not somebody who's just compelled to do it. It's because they need that. Or they've been raised badly, or so many things that are all fixable and all things that we can actually address. And we don't. Instead, we defund the schools and feed all of that money into the cops and into prisons, where thanks to the 13th Amendment, it's one of these things where you get this sort of the bullshit propaganda history that we've taken as Americans, and you're like, oh, okay, so you have. I almost can't even say this without laughing because it's so fucking absurd. But we abolished slavery. Right? No, we didn't. We fucking didn't. You read the 13th Amendment, and that motherfucking thing has a fucking asterisk in it. It's except for punishment of a crime. So, slavery is still legal. 100% legal and constitutional in the United States. Not that everything being written down is actually real protection, but it doesn't matter, because even if it was ironclad, you couldn't go against the Constitution. Having slavery today is legal, and it's a thing that happens all the fucking time. Prisons are essentially, especially for-profit prisons, they're basically like work labor camps. And they pay prisoners fucking pittance. And they charge, for little basic services like phone calls and other things, they charge them exorbitant amounts. So on one hand, you're making pennies. You're making amounts that people in the developing world would scoff at. And on the other hand, if you want to do anything, you're getting charged massive amounts, and then you walk out with debt. It's a fucked up situation. And yeah, I mean, just the number of people that get put into that system. We like to think of ourselves as a free country and a fair country and all of this. We have fucking gulags. We have, I mean, like, legitimately fucking gulags, work camps where people are put in and fucked over and forced to work for basically, well, as slaves. And that's the United States. So anyway, got sidetracked. That's my whole thing. So getting back to something more reasonable. Back on topic. I'm definitely not going to make this one a very long one because I do have some stuff to get back to. The things I wanted to say. Strongly recommend listening to her podcast. And especially like I have trouble getting into the interview ones because they're mostly people in the fashion industry, and they're like, I'm just not that interested in the subject. And they're interesting interviews, but it's just out of my domain enough that, although they do, there's one at least with, I think, Iggy Azalea. I could be wrong. It's going to be embarrassing if it's somebody else. But I need to look that up. But there's one that I'm interested in because it's talking about like sex work and OnlyFans and some of these things. And in particular, like here, the concept was, if you're a woman or just female presenting in our society, you're immediately sexualized, just kind of by like being out in the world. And there's very little that you can do about that other than just like not going out. And so, and also, like your image, even if you're a model or you're somebody making money off of your image, the people who are really making the money are, I mean, it's like so many things in our culture, it's very exploitative. The people who are making the money are not the person doing the labor, the person who is giving up their image. It's the people who are like a layer past that. It's the, and so this idea was, I guess with OnlyFans, you're still doing that, but you're putting yourself out in a way that you're profiting from it. Although still, like OnlyFans is taking a cut, so I've never actually gone to OnlyFans. So I can't speak very. I have like a general concept of what it is, but beyond that, like this is the thing, the sort of. I'm not doing a great job of pitching the interview because I haven't listened to it yet, but that's like the broad strokes of that. And that one sounded interesting to me, and it gets to, and this gets to the topics that she seems to be talking about that I found interesting so far, but like feminism and white feminism, and particularly, the idea of empowerment and the idea of how many of these things are just like marketing bullshit, or a lot of like inherently racist things are kind of baked into it, very classist stuff, and patriarchal, just kind of baked into these terms. And my voice is going. And so, there's just a lot there, and a lot of thinking there that I've found interesting. And again, I mean, it is this problem where it's like, even though I again don't think we're like perfectly aligned, she's saying things that resonate with me, and I think people like to hear things that they agree with. So, it's making me nod and clap for that reason. And not to say that I agree with everything that she's saying, but for the most part, seems well considered and seems kind of aligned with where I would put myself. And so that's like the main thing. I particularly like her solo episodes because, unlike this, it's her having a discussion with nobody, but they're very well put together. They're very thoughtful. Again, they have the production and the ads and this kind of stuff. it's kind of like a necessary evil in the world we live in, and probably like would she make these if there was no money in it? I don't know. It'd be interesting to know. I feel like she has things to say, but who knows? Um, I think there's stuff there that's worth being heard, and especially also, and it gets back to this thing where like I have the blurred lines version of her, and then a couple of snapshots over time, and then the current one, and then you get like a picture of where somebody was, where somebody is, maybe the trajectory of where they're going, and you also get kind of a I mean, it's different with different people. I always go, and I started mentioning this before, but don't think I finished the thought. I always go back to Shakira because Shakira is within like a year or so of my age. I'm not sure exactly, but very, very close. And I saw her in when she was like 18, and followed her through all of her, and she has albums like every year or two from then to the present. And so it's not just like a couple of snapshots, you're kind of following that trajectory, and it's more of a continuum than that sort of like few stills and kind of inferring the motion from that. So, not that there was a point to that, but it's just like, it really strikes me. I'm sure at some point that will be a thing that I've just fully assimilated, but I really am still in the point where I'm like, oh, yeah, people have an arc, and people have, I mean, it's a combination of things because people go from here to there. And yet at the same time, even though they're very different, and it is interesting because like some people are very static. You'll see people over their lives and they don't change that much. And then some people change a lot. But even when they change a lot, you can usually see the seeds of what would come earlier on. And I mean, it's an interesting, to me anyway, sort of thought experiment. Like, could you have looked at her at that time when I think her perspective on things was very different, and seen that she was, you know, kind of special in this way that she's going to get to where she is? Yeah, I don't know. Is that a trajectory that everybody has? Is that something, you know, maybe I'm just not being fair, and I'm kind of, I see people in that age and I don't see the arc, so I don't see the growth, and I'm assuming that people don't do it. But I feel like even if that, I assume everybody grows to some extent. I feel like she's done a little bit more than most, and seems to be going in a well way, in a good way. It's funny. I feel compelled when I make a stupid English mistake to point out that I have a PhD. But man, sometimes, you know, like I think about things and I have a concept in my mind. I feel like I know what I'm saying, and shit just comes out that's just like, what the fuck were you even thinking? Like that's like, if English was not your first language, then maybe you'd have an excuse. Or if you were a kid and you didn't have very much education, maybe you have an excuse, but you have no excuse, and still. So anyway, I do think I'm gonna get back to work. Not that I want you to watch something other than me. Obviously, watch my shit, listen to my shit. No, I'm kidding. Again, I put this stuff out independent of people watching or listening to it. I don't know why. Someday I'll figure that out, but I just feel compelled, and I enjoy it. And it's weird also because I am not a fan of video. Like, I'm not a fan. I'm uncomfortable already with the voice, but the video makes me super uncomfortable even to this day. And yet, I continue to make these, and I don't know why. Just, you know, I'm getting more comfortable with it, so that's something, I guess. But, you know, it's an interesting thought as well. Just if you saw me, and I guess I was thinking about this because I just went to Japan, and the last time I went to Japan was like 20 years ago. At that time, I didn't really speak any Japanese. I'm embarrassed retrospectively. I think I wore shorts the whole time. It was in the spring, and people wear shorts. It's not like totally out of the question, but I don't think I would do that now if I went back. Certainly not, maybe in the summer when it's hot and if I'm doing certain things, but just in general, I feel like it was probably a little bit of the ugly American, a little bit disrespectful. Although not nearly as much so as some of the fucking dudes that were on my flight, who were like, especially the dude who was coughing and sick and taking off his mask and all that kind of shit. I was not that guy. I can say. Even, there's no point in my life where I was that big of an asshole. But I do think, I do feel some sympathy for people like that, because I feel like this person was, barring like some kind of like a TBI or like a cognitive deficit for whatever other reason, he's mentally capable of the metacognition and the empathy and the sort of ability to understand what he looks like to the world. And he's probably just not been educated properly. Like, his parents probably didn't raise him well. And, you know, which I think, I mean, I go back to this a lot with, you know, like with politics, the whole appeal of Trump and people like Trump, you really do feel like the people who are attracted to that, they're seeing their dad. I mean, not just their dad, but, you know, like the archetype of their dad is the shithead, narcissist, kind of like Trump, full of shit, liar, and they haven't recovered from that. They haven't, you know, been, they've never gone to therapy. They've never done any kind of either self-help or anything to try to reflect and improve themselves from that basis. And so they're just, you know, automatically gravitating towards something that's just like reflecting, I don't know if it's past trauma or whatever the fuck, but whatever the fuck, I think that's a big thing. And I think also a big thing is just people, you know, empathy and metacognition and caring about other people, these kinds of things, they are things that I think are inherent to people to some extent. I think we all, you recognize that other people have feelings. It seems like a pretty obvious thing. You recognize that other people have a subjective experience in the world. And I think that's true, and I think everybody has that, you know, within a range. There are some people with more, some people with less. But I do think there's a certain element of also just being trained to think in a certain way. I don't know if trained is the right word, but, you know, being educated or having someone kind of mentor you and guide you to really developing empathy. And not like an unhealthy, you know, like trauma response kind of empathy where you're like hyper focused and hypersensitive to anything that somebody's doing because you're afraid, you know, things are gonna, you know, like a real understanding of, okay, other people exist, they have their own interests and preferences and all this kind of stuff, and just, you know, A, try to get out of their way, and B, if it costs you nothing, why not try to help them? Try to be, those kinds of things are not things that I think are necessarily inherent to everybody. And certainly also to the extent that they are, I think some people have them beaten out of them. I think, you know, I mean, there's an interesting question actually. When you see people who are these sort of staunch, you know, like can't share, you know, like do your own, you know, trying to think of the expression that they use. I can't. But, you know, it's like, I earned it, you need to earn it too. Is that something that people, this is a thing I need to probably do some research on, because I have no idea. Is it that people started out the other way and kind of through life experiences and the way they were raised got to that point, which is an interesting, you know, if that's the case, it's actually like people are doing active harm in addition to just not getting better. Or is it that you need, you know, like everybody starts out a little bit there and you need somebody to train you the other way? I feel like my guess just based on, I mean, this is really more speculation and it's not based on too much, but my guess is actually it probably is that they're trained to be more selfish and to be more of the idea that things are scarce and people have to work to get things. And I think that's probably been beaten into people, and it's just out of my, it's probably that it's so far out of my experience that I just don't think about it, and that's really sad and maybe enlightening if I'm right about that. I need to do a lot of research and figure that out, because it is an interesting thought to me. But anyway, with that, I'm losing my voice and I need to get back to work. So I, as always, thank you for listening or watching. And again, check out EmRata's podcast and 再见。